Good morning. In chapter 6 of John's Gospel, Jesus is already popular. As well as his 12 disciples, Jesus has a large crowd of followers who have been attracted by what he's been doing, especially for the sick. They are so enthralled that they have followed him well out of the city to the Sea of Galilee, and most of them have forgotten to pack any food. This creates a little humanitarian crisis, which Jesus solves in the feeding of the 5,000, described at the beginning of chapter 6. This impresses the crowd even more, and they call him a prophet. Jesus does not appear to enjoy his popularity. After his miraculous meal, he does not work the crowd, signing autographs as the prophet Jesus and posing for selfies. Instead, he tries to get away. He and his disciples come up with a plan. They will cross the sea in a boat, and Jesus will go separately. I'm not sure what Jesus told them, but they seem quite surprised that his mode of travel is to walk. Still, the plan works. The crowd keeps an eye on the disciples and loses track of Jesus. Why is Jesus so determined to escape? Chapter 6, verse 15 gives us a clue. It says, "When Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew." This was not an idle problem. Herod Archelaus, son of Herod the Great, was king of Judea during Jesus' early childhood. He faced multiple revolts during his short-lived tenure. According to the Jewish historian Josephus, 3 different men tried to usurp Archelaus and become king. The Romans stepped in and put down the rebellions with extreme violence, and then they banished Archelaus to Gaul. So when Jesus is concerned that the crowd's fervor might lead them to try and make him king or lead a rebellion, that's not an idle fear. But then at the beginning of our passage, they find him again. Given everything else Jesus does, I think we can assume he's capable of getting away from a crowd successfully. In other words, he lets people catch him. So why the whole hide and seek routine? This is just my opinion, but I think Jesus does this because he wants to have a certain kind of conversation. He doesn't want to try and convince a mob why he shouldn't overthrow the Romans. Rather, he wants to talk to a smaller, calmer group about what they are looking for. That's what's being examined in our passage today. Our text begins with the crowd questioning Jesus. They address him as Rabbi, which is respectful, but you can almost feel the frustration. They say, "When did you come here?" In other words, "How did you sneak away from us?" Jesus, feeling a little sassy after a midnight sea journey, tells the crowd they are only seeking him because he filled their bellies with bread. Basically, you don't really know or care about me, only what I can do for you. This is a purely transactional relationship. Then Jesus goes on. Don't work for food that perishes, but for food that endures for eternal life. This is honestly a bit rough. When they are not chasing potential profits, most of the crowd has to work to put food on the table. Is Jesus saying they should stop? I think the fact that Jesus is discussing food that endures forever, which the Son of Man will give them, suggests we're already on a metaphorical or spiritual level. And the crowd gets that. They intuit that Jesus is talking about a God thing. And immediately they ask, what must we do to perform the works of God? Close together in this passage, we keep seeing the concept of work or works. Jesus tells the crowd to work for food that endures, not food that perishes. They ask what works they must perform. Jesus then explains that the work of God is to believe in who God has sent. In other words, to trust in Jesus. Then the crowd asks, what work are you performing? Notice the reversal? They were asking what they should do, but when Jesus says all they need is to trust him, they want him to work. What sign are you going to give us, they ask. Are you like Moses, in other words? Prove it, and we'll commit ourselves. What I hear here is an underlying anxiety that drives this search for activity. The situation in first century Palestine is not good. The Roman whip is brutal. The advice of their established religious leaders is wearing thin. And some free food, while essential, is not enough for lasting hope. So the questions bubble up. What are we doing wrong? What should we be doing? Why should we trust you? What are you doing? Is any of this enough? Jesus' answer is to reframe the question. In verse 31, the crowd, who, again, has eaten a lot of bread recently, references a scene from the Exodus where God provided the Israelites with bread from heaven. Jesus hears that, and instead of comparing himself to Moses, Jesus says that the bread came direct from his Father. The bread that they got in the desert was from God. Jesus' Father, he says. And moreover, this godly bread is still available. The crowd finally jumps at a clear thing. Give us this bread, always, they demand. Jesus then drops one of his more famous lines. It's a tricky one. He says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. If we interpret this verse in a literalistic way, it's not true. People who believe in Jesus can and will experience physical hunger and thirst. There are followers of Jesus in this city who are experiencing deep hunger right now. So this interpretation can't be right. And we know Jesus cares about physical hunger. He fed 5,000 people just yesterday. Moreover, there's a food bank in Toronto called Daily Bread, right? Reflecting the fact that churches have been involved in this for centuries. So this verse can't be suggesting that material food doesn't matter. I think something else is in view here, and the crowd does too. They've been fed. They've gotten the brush off on their attempt to crown a new king, but they're still searching. They're looking for something to do or something that someone else is doing that brings life. And they're willing to chase a rabbi across the sea to find it. Now, we could brush them off as neurotic first century folks. We could. But hey, do you live in Toronto? I do. When I go walking around, I see some nice houses, lots of bread. But even folks in this neighborhood live in the modern economy, an economy of scarcity, where there's only so much to go around. And if you're not keeping up, you're falling behind. And it's not just money. University admissions, caring for aging parents, dating. There's only so many spots. There's only so much time. There's only so many chances. And so we strive and wonder, am I working enough? Will this bring me life? In the Gospel of Matthew, not John, chapter 6, Jesus says something a little bit like our passage. First he says, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink. Then, he says, look at the birds of the air. They don't farm or gather into barns. They're fed by God. And consider the lilies of the field. They neither toil nor spin, but they are clothed in splendor. Unlike us, these creatures live in an economy of abundance. Now, I don't know about you, but I do not respond well to being told, do not worry. That advice usually has the opposite effect. But when I occasionally stop to look at the birds, or observe the color of the trees, or the light reflected through the windows, I occasionally notice that creation has a life of its own that I can enjoy without doing anything. In fact, again, I struggle with this, but I dare say that doing nothing for a few minutes is the best way to appreciate the natural world and its abundance, and maybe to be grateful. I wish I could cultivate this attitude more. I want to recognize the abundance of creation, how it keeps going even when I'm not contributing. Every morning when I wake up and start thinking about the work I have to do, creation is already at work. Every morning when you wake up and start thinking about what your day holds, creation is already at work. It's just there, independent of our activity and striving and worrying. It's something to be thankful for, although I rarely do. So with today's conversations about bread, Jesus seems to suggest that if we look at him, we can begin to imagine an economy of abundance rather than scarcity. We can begin to realize that God's economy is abundant. And then maybe we can stop, just for a moment, but wondering what we need to do, what work is ours. Like creation, Jesus is already at work, already providing, already doing enough for everyone. While we're worrying, Jesus is saying, I'm enough. Put down your burdens, stop running, stop searching. Come to Jesus. Trust him. It's the message of this passage. Thanks be to God.